Hello and welcome to the EMSOL webinar, Improving Air Quality in Construction. My name is Charles Watson and I'll be hosting this event for the next 60 minutes. Managing emissions during the construction phase of a building's life cycle has always been an important topic, but with the COVID-19 pandemic, it is crucial for respiratory health right now and an important part of getting team members back to work safely. So today we have an incredible team of speakers joining us to give you their experiences and insights on why improving air quality matters in construction, and also insights on investments they've made which enable air quality improvements every day. I'll go through the agenda and give you some tips to make this webinar as useful as possible. But first, we want to say thank you for joining us today. Across the UK and across the globe, we're experiencing such an unprecedented and rapid change in business and consumer behavior due to COVID-19. And everyone on this webinar today is directly and indirectly impacted professionally and personally. So thank you so much for taking the time to present today and for taking the time to learn how we can improve air quality to help get construction restarted and help maximize respiratory health on sites and in the communities around the sites. All right, so now on to the housekeeping. If any of you are having audio problems now or during the webinar, you can send a chat message within the Zoom to the meeting host, Ben Fielden. You do this just by clicking on the chat thought bubble on the bottom or top of your Zoom screen. Then you type your message in the type here to chat box, and then clicking on send to send the message. We'll be keeping everyone but the host and presenters muted, but you can ask questions at any time through the Zoom Q&A interface and to Ben, the host. The Q&A label should be at the top right or the bottom of the Zoom interface. Click that, click Ask Question in the dialog box, and then type your question in the I want to ask a question box. Then press send. This may sound obvious, but not everybody's used Zoom before, so I hope you don't mind me going through this. These questions will go to the panelists and they won't be seen by other attendees. Ben will capture all the questions and we'll go through them at the end during the Q&A. Another important point is that there may be a delay of the slides updating on some screens across the UK. There doesn't seem to be a reason we can fix, but we suspect that the increased load of remote meetings like this are causing a delay on bandwidth. All of our presenters know this, and we're trying to accommodate this delay. Please be patient with the content on the screen not matching perfectly with the presenter's words if that is in fact happening with you or with the presenter. Okay, so now that we're all through all that, here's a quick look at the agenda. We'll start with an overview of air quality challenges across construction and infrastructure from Peter Crosland at Sika. Then we'll get some specific insights about air quality challenges and lessons learned in urban construction from Matt Story at Skanska. I'll give you a short overview of EMSOL and our solution, and then we'll get right into the LSE case study with Ben Marson-Rydens going through the LSE site data and a demo of the EMSOL platform, followed by Dan Reeves from LSE discussing their approach and investments to improving air quality, and we'll finish with a Q&A. So without further delay, I'd like to hand the presentation over to Peter Crosland of Sika.
Okay, thanks, Charles. So anyway, welcome everybody, good morning, and I hope you're all fit and healthy. This is just going to be a very quick whistle-stop tour. 10 minutes won't quite do it justice, but we'll give it a go. So my name's Peter Crosland. I'm the National Civil Engineering Director with Sika, which is the Civil Engineering Contractors Association. So for those who don't know, Sika has about 300 members. We're a trade association. And we have members from Tier 1 to Tier 3 and SME. And I'm really pleased that we have a member presenting later on, which is really good. And our members deliver sort of anywhere between 70 and 80% of all the infrastructure across the UK. You can also see from below that I wear a number of other hats as well. I'm also chair of the CONIAC, which is the Construction Industry Advisory Committee, Tackling Ill Health Working Group. I also vice chair the Institution of Civil Engineers Health and Safety Expert Panel, and I'm a member of the Health and Construction Leadership Group. So that's enough about me. Moving on. I've only got about half a dozen slides, but I just want to cover some old ground, possibly looking at some common causes of pollution, which I'm sure most of you will be aware of. But it's a case of really how do these relate to construction? And it's during recent surveys found that construction sites are responsible for circa 7.5% of all NOx emissions, about 8% of all PM10s, and about 14.5% of PM2.5s. And it's no surprise really that looking at that top left-hand corner, diesel is the worst culprit. So looking at diesel engine exhaust emissions, I mean, these are likely to, as we all know, come from generators, heavy vehicles, and lorries, excavators, and telehandlers and the like. And the more significant risks are linked to longer periods of work with the equipment, and particularly in enclosed spaces, I'm sure we're all aware of, and in situations where there is black and blue smoke, which I'm sure we've all experienced sometime in our life. And breathing Ds can cause a number of ill health effects. In the short-term exposure, probably not too bad. It may cause eye or respiratory irritation. You can get rid of that just by going out into some fresh air. However, longer periods of exposure, and in particular to any black or blue smoke, can lead to coughing, chestiness, and even breathlessness. And you might not think, well, that's not too bad, or you might think that's not too bad either. But there is evidence, and the HSE have done quite a bit of research on this, that repeated exposure to Ds over many years can increase the risk of lung cancer. And they've found out that the estimate is based on past exposures of over 50 years. So it takes 50 years to present with symptoms following the exposure to certain fumes. And you'll probably see the analogy or recognize the analogy with asbestos, which I've got there on the top right, in that we've known about asbestos related diseases for about 40 years now. We're only just about going past the peak of fatalities. We are thankfully now on a downward trend, but that has taken we've known about it for 40 years. And due to the lag of incident and presenting, it's something that we ought to be aware of as an industry. It's almost a case of we don't know what we don't know, but it's just trying to be aware of things. I've put on the list there welding fumes. Recent advice from HSE: fumes can cause lung cancers. And the third red circle there is RCS, respirable crystalline silica. There's a new report out by B&CE, silica, the next asbestos. So, whilst we think we know, we think we've got some good data around asbestos, have we got enough data around silica to be able to move forward as an industry? So just a few questions there. And really, so moving on, air quality, why does it matter? Might seem like a daft question, but some of the facts: construction workers are at high risk of contracting lung disease. Simple as. It's a sad fact. And in 2015, you can see from the figures there, approximately 3,500 died from cancer caused by past exposure to asbestos, 500 more from silica dust. So again, that was 5 years ago, and I suspect that number will be rising. And 5,500 diagnosed with occupational cancers. Not all related to air quality, but I suspect a significant number will be. And for me, it's the second bullet point that really stands out. 56% of all male occupational cancers are related to those working in the construction industry. And when I first saw that, I was absolutely staggered, and perhaps you will be as well. And that's why we do have to do something about air quality. And third bullet point, not moving away from the tragedy, 20 tradespeople die each week from asbestos-related diseases. So all those, whilst they're absolutely, it's a terrible thing to happen, there is an associated cost And it's something that the industry has been looking and working quite significantly on over the past few years. I mean, I've done some work with the ICE and Loughborough University on something slightly related, but the HSE report 2019, workforce injury and new cases of ill health, cost the UK £1.2 billion, of which sort of circa 640 million down to ill health. Now, again, not all of that will be due to air pollution, but there will be a significant part of it that will be. So I've just put this up really as not necessarily a challenge, but it's a case of what are we doing? And notwithstanding the good work that I'm sure you'll hear about later on in the presentation, I just thought it'd be worth revisiting some of the regulations and some of the maybe non-mandatory advice that we have been given as an industry over the years. It does go back to 1992, the EU regulations, but more recently, between 2001 and 2020, even this year, new regulations on NRMMs. But for me, BEIS, the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, in their document in 2018, only passing mention of clean growth. Local industry strategies, 2018, no mention of air quality at all. Construction sector deal, 2018, it only mentioned clean air in the introduction by Greg Clark, and there's nothing else. The Construction Leadership Council, next on the list, and the Green Construction Board, various initiatives are coming out of there, particularly the carbon emissions route map. And it's not a criticism, this, but it is more aspirational than mandatory. Obviously gives good advice and gives good recommendations, but as an industry, sometimes it's difficult to follow. However, local authorities have picked up the mantle, clean air zones and ultra-low emission zones. And for me and for some of our members, this is where the impact has been felt mostly. And it's actually changing behaviours, both good and I won't say bad, it's just a choice that some members are deciding to not bid for work in areas where the criteria is quite high. And that's because simple economics, that those organisations that don't have new fleet are perhaps can't afford or don't want to afford to go and buy a new fleet to be able to operate in new in those areas that have got ultra low emission zones. So that's a commercial choice, but it is affecting behaviour, I have to say. And quite often there is a dichotomy between, say, government aspiration and industry. And that's the point I'm making on that last bullet point, that clients have to satisfy shareholders and funders, contractors in the supply chain have to satisfy customers and the like. And we are, when I say market driven, we're guided by market trends and customer needs, and therefore not always necessarily government aspirations, unless it's, as I say, use the M word, mandated. I'm not going to go through this in detail. I'm going to leave the examples of good practice for members further down in the presentation. But what I would just like to do is signpost those attending the presentation to where you might be able to find good practice. And there's a whole list of them. So this is definitely not exhaustive. And I'm assuming that these slides will be made available after the presentation. So the links there hopefully will take you through to very good advice. The last point, final thoughts. I've got read, what else could we do? So we've got some really good practice, but what could we be doing? We've got the red diesel tax relief was due to the end of April 22, of which SECA and the CA, CPA and Build UK have been asked for further extensions. And the reason being that SECA have done a bit of number crunching on this, and there's something like £400 million extra burden on the industry if that rebate isn't continued through. So I'm suggesting that perhaps looking at paraphonic details, where hopefully we know that everything is really, very positive message: no sulfur, no aromatics, much reduced toxic hydrocarbons and nitrous oxides and particulates. But we still need more evidence to build up a robust argument. And my own personal view is that perhaps using that £400 million would help collect further information so that we can develop and use these fuels in the future. So with that, I will hand back.
Excellent, Peter. Thank you so much. And just to answer one question that he brought up, which is a good point, we will be sharing the webinar for on-demand viewing. But that presentation set us really up really well for our next presenter, who is Matt Story with Skanska. So Matt, if you want to share your screen and step in.
Absolutely, thank you. Just wanted to say, really enjoyed that first presentation, and that statistic about the 56% of cancers really is genuinely a staggering statistic, and I didn't know that, so thanks for that. So I'll go straight into this because I know how pushed we are for time. My name is Matt Story. I'm a sustainability specialist working with Skanska, one of the UK and the world's largest construction and development organisations, and today I'm going to be talking specifically about some work that we've been doing at Euston Station. There's some lovely background pictures of Scotland, which are just there to hopefully both cleanse our minds and metaphorically cleanse our lungs throughout as well. So hopefully that provides something nice to look at. So in terms of what I'm going to speak about, I'll do a little bit about who I am and who my team are. I'm going to talk about the challenge that we faced at Euston Station and a little bit about our study. And through that, some of the examples of best practice that we came up with. And the last 2 points, really, I'm going to have a look at some of the data that we managed to develop and some of the analysis we did. Obviously, we have so much data for this project, we can't go through all of it or anywhere near all of it. So I picked on a couple of very specific things which might be quite interesting for us all to look down, especially in light of the current lockdown. So that's going to be the end of the presentation. I shall try and make this as clear as possible. So this is our team. There are 6 of us working within Skanska, and essentially we are an in-house environmental consultancy supporting Skanska in projects in which we feel Skanska needs to be a sustainability leader. So areas where we really need to push the boundaries of what can be done. And one of those areas is air quality, which is why I'm here today. We have a number of air quality specialists within the team, Josh, Christina and Megan, but the majority of the work I'll be talking about today has been done by Megan and Christina, and it's a great example of what we can do in the construction industry. So Euston Station, for those of you who know it, which I suspect is most of you, it is a 1960s-ish station within north central London, one of the mainline stations. So we had a big challenge there. Skanska are doing construction works within the station, and as well as them, there are a number of other sources of poor air pollution. So we have a problematic project location. We are in the centre of London with very high air quality levels in the area. It's a place of work, so we actually have people who are working within there, which means that we have that Skanska and our supply chain are subject to HSE workplace exposure limits. We have numerous sources of pollution, so we have our construction works, we have the trains, and we have air coming in from outside. We have multiple stakeholders, we have the general public, we've got all the different train operating companies, Network Rail, who are our clients, and then the different supply chain partners we're working with. And most importantly, we had been receiving questions, complaints, people who were interested in what the air quality situation in the station actually was like. We have an office within what we call the parcel deck of the station, which is essentially what sits above the platforms. Any air from the down on the platform level can come up to there. It's completely connected via a number of ramps, and we had people who are working within those office spaces so people were interested as to what the air quality situation was. This meant we had to discover, well, what is the general situation? What gases do we have in there, and at what levels? Are we compliant from health and safety perspective? Are we compliant environmentally? And obviously through that, we'd look to get a clear idea of where our main sources were, and then off the back of that, generate recommendations for best practical means, mitigation measures to try and improve the levels. So at the station, we had initially 18 multi-gas monitors located around the platform levels, the public areas, and on the parcel deck, which is the area above, and in our offices. We are now going towards 35 monitors. We're in the process of installing a number of others. We are covering all of the key areas with particular focus on where people spend the majority of their time. We have had fantastic support, both from Skanska senior management, but also from our clients, Network Rail, in order to do this. People have seen that the benefit of this work is to try and help improve the health of the people who work there. we now have a very clear idea of the general situation around the station. We know what our main gases are, we know where our high risk areas, and we have a lot of closely analysed air quality data. What that has allowed us to do is to monitor areas where we feel that the HSE workplace exposure limits are close or may become close to being breached. And then we can, with that knowledge, begin to find out what times of days and locations that's happened and move people away from there, making sure that people aren't working in those areas at high risk times, so that we can begin to proactively manage the situation. We've also referenced when we have our highest pollution levels against the train times. So we, again, have a clear idea that if a particular train is in on a particular platform, for instance, we may have a problem in a particular part of the station. Again, it allows us to get people away from those areas. It allows us to avoid the air quality issues that brings. And finally, and there's a bit of a belt and braces approach, we have all of our key operatives working using personal gas alarms, which have trigger levels set to all of our problematic gas levels if they become close to the workplace exposure limits. We then have a process in place that if those alarm, they move away, and they move away for a certain amount of time depending on the alarm, and then they don't go back to work in that location until we know that those gas levels have become acceptable again. We also have exclusionary, have had to have exclusion areas for certain times, and that is something else that we've strongly enforced. So we've really taken a sort of very much health and safety led best practice approach to working on the project, and it has been very effective. We have also managed to improve the general levels by doing some proprietary works at the station, which have included increasing ventilation, increasing fresh air getting in. So there are improvements at the station. That's something that we're going to be pushing forward over the next year or so. So just going to go through a little bit of data, and as I say, this is just a few snapshots, but this is actually quite interesting. DEFRA called for sort of a call to arms for air quality specialists a few months ago, for people working in this field, to really see what kind of effect that the lockdown was having on the ambient air quality levels. So we supplied our air quality information, and I have it here. And you're seeing now NO2 levels within the station, how they have changed from February to March, which is pre to sort of pre to the start of lockdown, and then March to April, which is as the lockdown got more severe. And you see a significant decrease in our average levels, also in the peaks and troughs, but the average levels have gone down on our 50-minute averages by 16% February to March, and 26% March to April, and 18% and 36% respectively for 8 hours. So this is a big drop in NO2 levels, and that is also reflected in our NO levels as well, where we've seen a smaller drop from February to March, but bear in mind that half of March was actually pre-lockdown, and then a massive drop again down from March to April. So as the amount of traffic in the area decreases, as the number of trains decreases, as our construction works decrease, that has been incredibly well reflected within the data that we've had. And finally, this is my penultimate slide actually. This is quite an interesting thing that we've been doing as well, using Power BI, which essentially we've been using it for some of our deep analysis. And what you're seeing here, and it's probably quite confusing first up, is all the factors and how all the factors which can potentially influence air quality levels within the station and how strongly they correlate. So on the graph at the top, each of those 15 or so things are a location or a time or a certain aspect which could affect the air quality. Therefore, for instance, you could say at 5 o'clock, we know that there is a strong effect on the average air quality level, would be an example. Below, what you're actually seeing in the red circle is the effect of external air quality on the internal levels. And you'll see that in February, it's quite low. It's one of the lower key aspects. But as you get through to March and April, you see a significant increase in how much the external levels affect within the station, which is quite interesting because we know that the external levels have actually decreased, but as a proportion, we're seeing actually has a much more significant effect in the inside of this building because of the different factors within that building which are no longer happening. For instance, the trains and fewer people being in there and no construction work. So that was just a little bit of a takeaway we had from the data. That is everything from me. I think I'm probably at the end of my it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Obviously, if you'd like to get in contact, please feel free. Here's my email address. I'd be delighted to speak to you about anything. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Matt. That is a really challenging environment for you to operate in. Hang on, I'm just going to open up my slides here. And it's good to see that air quality has improved during the lockdown. I'd like to spend a couple minutes giving an overview of EMSOL, but first I just want to remind everyone how to submit a question for our Q&A session at the end. The questions are coming in quickly, which is great, but just to make sure everybody has a chance to ask, the Q&A label should be at the top right or bottom of the Zoom interface, depending on what device you're using. Click that Q&A icon, click Ask a Question in the Q&A dialog box, and then type your question into the I want to ask a question box. Then press send. Okay. So Matt's presentation really set us up well for talking a little bit about EMSOL. So I think the real strength of EMSOL, or one of the main strengths, is shifting from monitoring pollution to reducing pollution. I think we found, kind of across the globe, that air quality has improved during lockdown, and obviously that isn't completely sustainable. So we do need to get back to work. But in getting back to work, we want to do it in a better way, in a more sustainable way. So how do we ramp up development? How do we ramp up a movement of people, construction, and also not crank up our air pollution and pollution? So EMSOL empowers organizations to take steps every day to make a lasting difference in reducing transport pollution. That is really our mission. And the lasting difference is not just monitoring pollution, but doing something about it, and taking steps every day is a really key point of what we do. So we're a clean tech company, founded in 2017, and we're focused on improving air quality and reducing noise across logistics, construction, and rail. And we do that by fusing noise monitor and air quality monitor data with vehicle location data. And that helps, and then our system identifies pollution breaches and their sources. So when you have a vehicle location and you see a breach, you can determine what the source of that breach is. And then we can deliver targeted, specific insights and evidence through notifications and reports to drive specific pollution reductions. So some of the biggest challenges that our customers in construction face are sort of non-compliance with environmental regulation, real risks, things like fines, reduced funding, lost revenue from projects not being, bids not being won, respiratory health damage of their workers on site and around the community, obviously environmental damage and reputational damage. But it's actually very hard to maintain compliance because the teams are very small in general and under-resourced to actually monitor, and that's in the local authorities and in the construction teams. The breach evidence they work with is really unspecific and historic, oftentimes because the monitoring solutions aren't real-time, they're backward-looking, and they're not telling you kind of what to do, they're just telling you what has happened. And so it's not very actionable information. And so EMSOL solution was developed specifically to take air quality monitor data and noise data, set thresholds, tag vehicles with their location, and then deliver specific pollution breach evidence to support pollution enforcement. We also enable precise and targeted action to reduce air and noise pollution every day. And that's because if you know a specific vehicle is causing a noise problem, or you know a specific vehicle is causing a pollution problem, you can take that to the subcontractor and tell them, and they'll actually probably be sharing the same data you're seeing. So it's not a stick. It's more of a sharing information, having discussion. It really simplifies compliance because, again, you're not just looking at breaches and not being able to do anything. You're actually able to do something about it. So the site air quality actually improves over time. You create transparency between the contractor, subcontractor, local authority. Everybody can see the same data. If you want, obviously those are all settings you sent. We also can set it up to preempt against safeguards, against tougher future regulations by being able to just adjust the thresholds yourself. And then if you have legacy monitoring hardware investments already, we aren't a closed system. We're an open system. So we can actually take that data in from any air quality monitor. They have to have obviously real-time capability, but even if you're doing ambient measurement of air quality from LAQN monitors or anything like that, we can ingest that data to set the ambient levels as well. So, not to drive the point home too much, but how does the EMSOL solution work? So you're literally tagging vehicles. And so we know precisely what the vehicle location data is. You have air and noise quality monitors around the site. And as the vehicle goes past those monitors, we know it, and we know if a breach occurs. That data is then ingested, aggregated, and fused together, and then analyzed using the EMSOL platform. And then we deliver very simple, clear breach evidence through notifications like the one you're seeing on the screen. Also historical reports if you need to do reports on a quarterly basis. But really the key is to take action when the breach is occurring so that you're fixing it. And that obviously makes a compliance officer's job much easier. Instead of having to log into a system every day, see what's happening, guess what's happening, walk to different sites, observe the different data, they can actually know specifically which vehicle from which subcontractor is causing an issue or which piece of equipment. And EMSOL works with some great companies. We've been really lucky to work with some amazing construction companies, government organizations, local authorities, fleet operators, and rail organizations. So we're really, really proud of this, and we're very happy to work with them. And these are some of the people that are leading the way. So I hope that helps you understand more about what EMSOL does. And now Ben Marston-Ridings will actually go through the data from the LSE site and a demo of the platform. So Ben, if you want to share your screen.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, right. So thanks for listening, everyone. So I'm just going to talk about the LSE site that we did some monitoring on. The equipment is still there, actually. And then I'm going to show a live system demo and talk about what our plans are for the future. So what we do has been covered by Charles in a little bit of detail there, but basically we install monitoring equipment on people's sites, and then we aggregate all that data together in our cloud platform to give people more useful insights that they can actually use to have an effect on the local air quality. So the building that we've installed our equipment on for LSE is the Paul Marshall building. So a bit of introduction to the site for some context. It's a 12-level building of mainly concrete construction, and the building itself will have academic departments and support services and also recreation things such as a gym in it when it's finished. It's a pretty complex environment to work in. So on the right-hand side of this picture, you can see a 16th century building there, which actually is right on the boundary between of the new building. The street sizes in the surrounding area are of that era as well, so really narrow streets and a bit of a challenge for a construction supply chain. The student union is opposite this building. You can see the bike rack in the back there. Lots of students transiting through the site at all times of day. And there are teaching facilities nearby as well. So at the beginning and end of the hour, lots of students moving between lecture rooms and stuff like that. And then also, which is worth mentioning, is that next door there's a similar sized building project at the Royal College of Surgeons, which is unrelated to this, but obviously their supply chain will have an impact on the local air quality as well. Okay, so this is a bit of an introduction to who the partners were in the project. So MACE are the main contractor for this site. LSE Estates are effectively the customer. And then we had the LSE Geography Department who were interested in seeing the data that we'd gathered. A bit of a change for us, I guess, having a customer that wants to see all the raw data and do their own analysis with it. We then had the LSE Sustainable Future Society, so that's a student body who look at sustainability efforts on the campus. And then finally, Hanson, who are the concrete supplier for this site, which really does use a lot of concrete. Okay, so what did we do? EMSOL installed air quality monitors and a tracking system on the site, and we gathered data for 6 months. So the equipment is still there, and it went in November of 2019. We fitted locating tags to the Hanson vehicles to record the times of their deliveries and show the effects on the measured air quality in the local area. So we have a locating system, which is really low impact on the vehicles. They're just small tags that stick in the windscreen. and then we put some locating antennas on the site so we can see when the vehicles have arrived and when they've departed. It's generally, we find this as to be much easier than sort of looking to integrate with any vehicle telematics system, because it's just a bit easier and there's a lot less sort of concerns about data privacy and things like that. A couple of the findings. So one of them was that we found that the Hanson fleet were not the cause of most of the breach events, which shows the benefits of their modern fleet. So they've got mostly Euro 6 vehicles. They spent a lot on their fleet, and really the feedback that we got from them is that they don't really see that they get loads of advantage from having a modern fleet. They've got higher costs because they've purchased a lot of new equipment, but actually it's not really helping them win loads of new business, and they don't really get loads of good press or anything surrounding their use of a modern fleet. So this was an opportunity for them to show that their modern fleet was having a good impact on the local air quality. Okay, a second finding is that a stage 5 cement pump, which was on site, was shown to perform really well. So stage 5 is the one of the more recent standards for plant equipment, and again, this shows that spending the money on the new equipment does actually have an impact on the sites. Okay, next one, we found that there were some time periods with high nitrogen dioxide where there weren't any Hanson vehicles visiting the site. So we think that these are probably due to other suppliers, such as the waste contractor or the building site next door, or the local London environment in general. Again, we found that there were some time periods with high PM10, which we suspected due to other construction activity other than the supply chain. So things like drilling, sawing, all those kind of activities that create lots of dust will have an impact on the PM10 levels. And the final finding was that we had lots of different parties in this project, and we found that everyone wanted the data in a different way. So we had the geography department who wanted raw data to use in the curriculum and do data analysis on. And then we found that the fleet view was an important view for Hanson, because all they were interested in really was kind of the league table of their vehicles, which ones were the best, which ones were the worst. And then obviously the site view, which I'll show in a second, is important for the main contractor to look at the whole of their air quality situation and the supply chain. Okay, so I'm just going to move to a demo, which is always risky, but I hope we're going to be okay. So this is our live system for this site. So if I go to the fleets view, then we can see the data for today. Okay, I'm just going to have to log in again. Okay, yeah, so here we go. This is the data for this site. So we can see on this chart here what the amount of breaches were on a particular day, and what times of day they were as well. So I'll just take you around the screen first. Up here we can see the statistics for breaches for this week, or we can select another time period. What we consider to be a breach is exceedance of air quality limits. So air quality limits can be the DEFRA limits, which were put into law in 2010, or they can also be the health and safety executive limits, which are in EH40. It depends on what the customer is interested in for their particular situation. On the right-hand side, we've got a list of the most recent breaches, what times of day they were, and what the emission was. And then at the bottom, we've got the raw data for the time period specified. This is the week view, so that's from Monday morning to now. And we can see that on this site, there tends to be a peak in the middle of the day. So on Monday, it was about 1 o'clock, and then throughout the middle of the day on Tuesday and Wednesday. Okay, if we just have a look at the breaches view in more detail. So this is a list of all of the breaches in air quality for a particular period of time. And I'm just going to find one that's got a vehicle associated with it. So as we can see on this screen, there are lots of breaches that aren't associated with a vehicle visit. which could be due to other vehicles on the site or to the London environment in general. If we take a look at this one, so this is a back in February, there was a breach of nitrogen dioxide for the 3-minute average period limit on this site. And we can see that a graph of the air quality, and then on the bottom we can see the actual location of the vehicle throughout the time period of this breach. So this is the cement loading area for this site, and we can see that the vehicle arrived and then dropped off cement, and there was a rise in the levels of nitrogen dioxide during that time. But as I showed on the previous screen, there are lots of breaches that aren't associated with a vehicle. So this is by no means showing a bad thing about the Hansons vehicles. Okay, I'm just going to switch to a different type of view here. So this is the view that a fleet operator would get in our system. So we have 2 main views. One is for a site manager who can see all of the supply chain for their site. And the other one is for a fleet operator, so someone such as Hanson, who in this case were doing the cement supply. And they can see on this list all of their vehicles and whether they were involved in a breach event. So we've tagged up lots of the Hanson vehicles, and only a couple of them actually go to this site because of the way Hansons manage their operations. But the important thing on this list is that they can see which vehicles have done the most visits to the site, and also which ones have been involved in breach events. So they can see here that this particular vehicle did 12 visits to the site, and it was involved in four breach events, whereas the one below did 28 visits to the site and was only involved in 1 event. And over time, that allows us to build up a picture of which vehicles maybe are the best performers and which ones are maybe the worst performers. Okay, I'm going to show now what we think the future might hold for air quality. So we're always developing our system, and we've got some designs that we're working on implementing at the moment, and we hope for them to be live in the system for the next couple of months. So this is the first view I'm going to show. What we want to do on the reporting level for air quality is just make it much easier for organisations to manage, really. We often find that speaking to customers and to local authorities, that they're really pushed in terms of time pressure. They don't have enough people to look at each site in detail. Lots of local authorities have hundreds of sites and only a handful of people to look at the data. So we want to make it really simple for site managers and for local authorities to be able to analyse the data. So this is an example of a weekly report that someone would get showing all of their different sites and how many breaches there were on a particular day, so that they can put their efforts into the most challenging sites in terms of air quality. This is the new screen in the system, which we're going to have in the system soon. So again, it's the same kind of thing, showing all of their sites and a really easy red, amber, green status of what the air quality was like for the last period of time. So they can see here that Lupus Street maybe is the site they need to be spending some time on. Okay, the next kind of view is this one. So this is about allowing organisations to really investigate and drill down into the data and see what was the cause of it. So this is a chart of the air quality data, and then on the graph we want to plot different events that are happening during that period of time. So there might be a delivery that happened that we can put on the graph. We're looking at doing bus integration using the TfL unified API to get the bus information, and we can put the transit of buses past the site on this graph, so that can be added for a bit of context. And we can also add external data feeds such as the London Air Quality Network and other kind of nationwide air quality monitoring, so that we can see how the air quality was in the general local environment as well as on the particular site. Okay, and the final view, so we hope that air quality monitoring and air quality management can be a bit more interactive in the future. At the moment, a lot of the efforts are focused around reporting and doing analysis after the fact, but not very much happens on a day-to-day basis to help people actually improve the situation. So what this is a system where a construction manager on site, or maybe a logistics manager, would get a notification on their phone when the air quality in an area that they are responsible for has gone above a certain level. They can then have a look at the graph, as you can see on the right here, and they can have a conversation and put notes in about the air quality. So this will help with the monthly reporting that lots of sites have to do to environmental health in local authorities. Not only will they be able to they'll be able to report the data that they've collected over the last period, but they'll also be able to say what they actually did about it. So in this case, they can say that they've used some damping facilities to reduce a dust problem, for example. Okay, that's it from me. Thanks, and I'll pass back to Charles.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Ben. Our final speaker before the Q&A is Dan Reeves with LSE Estates, talking about embedding sustainability into their operations. So Dan, you could share your screen.
Okay, can you see that?
Absolutely, perfect.
Is that full screen? Yep. Can you hear me fine?
Yep. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so my name is Dan Reeves. I'm the Resident Sustainability Officer at LSE. We reduce our environmental impacts across a huge range of areas at LSE. Obviously, the built environment and air quality and pollution are two of the key ones. Just a quick overview of LSE. We've got a number of BREEAM outstanding buildings. The design, the Saucy Hock Student Union building, centre buildings, and 100% of our electricity is from renewable resources. We've invested £4.5 million in energy efficient projects across the campus in the last 5 years, and 33% reduction in our carbon emissions on a 2005-6 baseline. And obviously we also hold various ISO 14001, 5001 certifications. Built environment air quality is a key part of this. Obviously it's something we take very seriously. We're tackling air quality and pollution. The Paul Marshall building is due to open Michaelmas term 2021, and we're aiming for at least a BREEAM excellent rating on that. We touched on it earlier in the presentations. It combines teaching, academics, sports facilities over 12 floors. Air quality on campus is obviously a topic that concerns staff and students. We have a key role in addressing this. We've actually got an air quality position statement, and we're involved in quite a wide range of areas actually with tackling this. Sustainable Future Society is run by the SU. They've got a pot of funding, £20,000, which they can bid for. The EMSOL project was submitted in 2018-19 by the student presidents of that society, Jan Schremer and Ethan Stratford, took over. Why did the SFS support the EMSOL project? Basically, it's an area for LSE where we could look for air quality improvements. What can we learn and influence? Also, it's a great collaboration between LSE students, EMSOL, LSE Geography and Environment, academics, and obviously the estate sustainability team. One of the challenges, the Sustainable Future Society can be tricky coordinating a large number of stakeholders. There's obviously staff and student holidays, academic leave, we're obviously not all physically on site. There's differing levels of expertise, and also no one saw an international pandemic coming, of course. The project was led by 2 excellent students. It's still a challenge for them to actually translate the brief as it evolved, but obviously the sustainability team provides support. Development site itself provided a few challenges, recordings coming down, over equipment being replaced and removed, power challenges, etc., etc. So you do need a large element of goodwill to actually do these kinds of projects. In terms of opportunities for the estate, we're really keen to get a deeper understanding of construction, vehicle traffic, air quality, and noise impacts for future developments at LSE, to learn more about the kind of pollutants, their sources, and what we can do in future to improve in these areas. So we're really looking forward to the final report, so LSE can enhance its approach, future development. We've also learned collectively a lot, basically, from this project to help improve the well-being of the LSE community going forward. And it's been great as well linking up students with real life projects on campus. So they've got a proper connected curriculum project to work on, which would be brilliant for their CV and future career boosting as well. And I think also this project's been great as well for breaking down silos, connecting students, professional staff, academics, large companies, and also a kind of really innovative, growing SME. That's it from me. I hope that's a very quick but useful summary.
That is excellent, Dan, and apologies for missing the introduction. I was multitasking, which is never a good idea.
No problem at all.
So I wanted to mention that is, gives a really, really great perspective on not only the overall efforts towards improving the LSE environment, but then specifically around the project. I'm just going to now share my screen, and we're going to move into the Q&A session, and that's going to be run by Ben Fielden. So Ben, you take it away.
Yep, thank you very much. And thank you for all the questions that were submitted as well. We have probably more than we have time for, but I'm going to start with some of the questions fielded to Peter and Matt first, and then we can go on from there. So first of all, Peter, I've seen you've answered some in the Q&A, so I won't touch on those, but I think there's a really interesting one from a councillor who says, what can a councillor do, someone in local government do to support air quality?
Yes, I'd seen that, and I was doing the easy answers first. Although I have to say, I haven't thought about this one. I did sort of part answer it, but I haven't sent it yet. I wonder whether it's just as simple as procurement, and I think local authorities have shown the way in terms of how they've addressed the clean air zones and the ultra low emission zones. And it's probably not a huge leap for local authorities to introduce into their documentation and PQQ particular requirements around air quality. And I know that the industry might take a sharp intake of breath on that, but it's a case of, is it a case of a stick or is it the carrot? And that's what I was trying to allude to in part of my presentation, whereby we have government aspirations, but how do we make industry work differently? And whilst there is the legal compliance, we've also got a moral obligation to change as well. And it's just trying to find that nuance between the two. So I do think local authorities look at procurement and use procurement and tendering as an opportunity to improve or try and improve air quality.
Thank you. And there's another one here, and obviously you didn't answer it, and it probably is a bit of a trickier one, but who's liable for worker health issues when a person has been diagnosed? Do you have the answer to that one?
Well, no, there is a reason I didn't answer that, because I don't have the answer. It's a huge question, and I suppose I have looked at this because we have been asked by members, particularly around COVID-19, about the increased liability of organisations through COVID-19. And for me, and I don't want to sound trite about this, but really, in terms of the regulations and the legislation, nothing really has changed. If you go back to the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974, then we have to deal with the risk or risks. And COVID-19, I don't know whether this question was particularly relevant to COVID-19, but if you take that as an example, it is an additional risk that needs to be put into that risk assessment matrix. So as long as you can show that you have done everything which is so far as reasonably practical, etc., then as an employer, you perhaps have protected yourself. But in terms of the reporting, it spins out into whether it's a RIDDOR, so that's reporting of injury, disease or dangerous occurrence regulations, and there's a whole list of occupational diseases that are listed in there. And it's a question of, obviously, when was it diagnosed, and can you trace that back through the actions and activities of the individual, and also can you trace it back to the actions of that employer? So it's a very, very complex area.
Yeah. So there's a sense where data and tracking things can actually be quite helpful then, potentially.
Well, it is. And as an employer, if you can show that you carrying out a full investigation around, so it's burden of proof, essentially, of where that either disease or injury occurred.
Okay. Fantastic. Thanks for that, Peter. I see you've answered two other questions on the Q&A anyway.
Yeah.
So I'll move to Matt. We have a few questions for you. I'll sort of cherry pick some. Sophia asked about the gas alarms that you'd fitted as personal gas alarms with alerts for poor air quality. We're just wondering what mitigation measures you'd use once those have been put in place.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was in terms of the actual gas alarms, what we have is a process. So when the alarms will trigger short of the workplace exposure limits, which will be essentially the trigger for you to move away from where you're working, go to somewhere where we can guarantee better air quality. After a period of time, and the period of time depends on the situation of the alarm, someone will go back into that environment using the correct PPE and take further measurements if necessary to ascertain as to whether that level has improved. If it has, people can come back to work. We also use our fixed monitors if they are appropriately located for that area to try and do the same thing. In terms of making actual big mitigation changes to the station, that's proven more difficult just because it's an old station and our works don't really, that isn't a part of it. We can't just take bits of the roof off, put in big bits of extra ventilation usually. However, we are using our gas and our air quality information to inform the design of the new Euston station. So it is being, in terms of the future generations use that station, it is being considered now, and all the information we have now is going into that design. So I hope that partially answers the question.
Yeah, that was good, thank you. I'm just looking at the other ones we had. I think you already shared some stats on the pollution levels during lockdown, didn't you? So I think that one's probably been answered. But
yes.
we're just also wondering about justifying the budget allocated for your air quality engagement. Where did that come from? Is that something Skanska supports, or?
Absolutely. So the question, I did spot this question. I had a little bit to think about the best way to answer it. So in our case, it was supported by Skanska and supported by Skanska's client, most importantly. So it was quite easy. In general, I found there's two ways to go about this in terms of getting a budget for air quality. It's either you have to demonstrate the risk, and the way you do that is really to push on the health and safety side, more so than the environmental side. To be honest, that is where companies like ours see the risk. Or the other way is to get to see the opportunity. Because particularly if you're talking directly to your client and you're talking about a long-term asset or an asset you're managing for them, improving the air quality within that can, as I'm sure most people on the call know, can have a huge effect, a positive effect on the health of people living or working after that, their productivity, and there's lots and lots of studies out there. We do a lot of work around the monitoring of indoor air quality and predicting how we can improve that to improve the living environment. It improves the value of their asset. Therefore, they don't mind spending a little bit of money to do that if it improves the value of their asset.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'm just going to hand quickly back to Charles because we are hitting the time. I think we have some more questions that I want to get back to, but I'll just hand back to Charles for a second.
Yep. So we're going to capture and get answers for and share all the questions and answers for the questions that were answered and the unanswered ones. And we're going to actually keep going once this session is formally over, answering questions as much as we can for anybody that wants to stay on. But one thing that we wanted to mention before we close is an extension to the EMSOL air quality platform that we're starting. This capability is in the area of COVID-19 safety. It greatly helps construction sites adhere to the CLC site operating procedures. And kind of at the highest level, EMSOL's received funding from Innovate UK's program, Business-Led Innovation in Response to Global Disruption. And we're going to extend the EMSOL platform to show compliance with site operating procedures for contact tracing in construction industry. We're leveraging EMSOL's expertise in resource, location, analytics, and cloud software. And we're extending the current EMSOL platform with two key capabilities to make construction sites COVID-19 safe or safer. Deliver evidence that team members are adhering to the social distancing and hygiene requirements laid out in the SOPs. Hopefully everybody's seen those SOP documents. They're available on the CLC site. And then when on-site workforce member has been diagnosed with COVID-19, we can identify the location and the other workforce members they may have been in close contact with during a specific time window. There aren't too many solutions that will have the capability to deliver with this level of accuracy required to actually give real evidence of adherence and infection tracing. We have trial partners in place, and if you're interested, we'll keep you informed as we progress. So just a quick kind of side note about that. And then, kind of formally just wanted to say thanks to all the presenters and attendees for this informative session on improving air quality in construction. we really hope that everybody attending got some insights on how to process adjustments and technology can help get construction in the UK back to work quickly, and with a higher focus on respiratory health for on-site teams and local community. As I think we mentioned at the beginning, we'll be sending the link to a recording of this webinar to everyone who registered, and you should receive that email early next week. And if you have some immediate questions and want to follow up with an EMSOL team member, please contact our sales team at sales@emsol.io or the number on the screen. And with that, I'm actually going to hand it back to Ben, and we'll just kind of continue on with the Q&A, but thanks for everybody who attended.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted to continue going with some of these questions because I think there are some interesting ones in here, and we definitely won't have time for all of them. This one is perhaps a mix of Charles and Ben could answer this one. I think Serena asked an interesting question and said, could this be, specifically talking about the LSE site and thinking about that, but could it also be applied to other heavy goods vehicles rather than just concrete trucks? And does EMSOL support anything around site logistics as well?
Yeah, so I use this site as an example because LSE very kindly agreed to join the call, but we've got lots of other sites where we've done all parts of the supply chain. So in this case, it's a concrete supplier, but waste is often a fleet that will visit a site regularly, as well as a metalworking supplier. So the vision for us really is that we tag up the whole supply chain, as well as all of the plant and everything really, to get the proper holistic picture. And then there's another question about supporting the site logistics and finding the best time for vehicles to arrive on site. So yeah, we're really keen for the data to be used to make people work smarter with the times of their deliveries and things like that. And also there's the potential for the information to be used to provide justification for maybe doing early morning deliveries or later in the evening deliveries, by showing that they can do those deliveries without having an impact on the people in terms of air quality, and also the noise that's created by doing them slightly earlier in the day or later.
Excellent. A more practical question from Jake was, how many monitors are installed at a site to get coverage of the whole site? I mean,
yeah, so that's a difficult question to answer. So it depends a lot on the airflow on a site. If it's a really open site, then you could say that in general the air quality across the site will be more the same because there's lots of air circulation, whereas one that's got lots of streets and other buildings and stuff may have local areas of poor air quality. But I guess a way that we can, a kind of rule of thumb that we could say is that we will try and put them 20 to 30 meters apart on sites if that's what we're able to do. But another consideration there that I think is particularly important is, put the air quality monitors where the people are going to be, because the people are the ones who are going to be, breathing the air in. So putting them around the edge of a site is good, and also putting them where construction work is going on the inside as well.
Thank you. And I'll make this the final question, I promise. It could be a mix really here of Dan and Ben, probably both most familiar with the work at LSE. But what was the impact of monitoring LSE? I mean, and I think it actually connects up as well with another question, which is sort of around how fleets have reacted sort of when they're being monitored. So I can sort of merge two questions together a little bit. So what is the impact, and what sort of reaction do you see from fleets? Because after all, they are one of the parties being monitored in this.
Yeah, so I can touch on the reaction of the fleets. I think a lot of the fleet operators that we speak to are initially very nervous and a bit concerned. But in the case of this site especially, they very quickly came round when they realised that they could show how their modern fleet was having a positive impact. And I'd say that goes across to other sites as well. And there's someone's mentioned about vehicle operations and maintenance as well in another question. So Hanson in this case wanted to use the data to go and put their vehicles in for additional tests if they were were seen to be particularly bad. So they would go and do a tailpipe measurement in their workshop just on those vehicles that were identified as maybe being not as good as the others. So I think obviously it depends on the fleet, but I would say people start off a bit nervous and then start to realise the potential and how it can help, and that it isn't really about pointing the blame necessarily.
Dan, I don't know if you have anything to add about sort of the impact of real-time air monitoring at LSE, if you've noticed anything.
So they haven't taken any steps at this site that I'm aware of to change the times of deliveries or anything like that. And with the concrete trucks, it's actually quite difficult because they can't turn the vehicles off because they have to keep the drums spinning. But for other sites, one of the things that we get fleets and construction companies to think about is whether they can put up anti-idling signs. So if you're having a delivery of steel, for example, then you can say to all of the deliveries that are doing that they have to turn their engines off when they go and book in and stuff like that. Obviously, that's not possible in this case because the concrete ones have to stay running. But I will say that MACE, as the main contractor, are interested in using the data to kind of negotiate with Westminster Council about lengthening the delivery hours, because the times they're allowed to do deliveries at the moment is the busiest time for when students are on site, and that really doesn't make sense.
Perfect. I think that's the end. I'll wrap up the questions on that then, and just thank everyone again for joining and for the excellent questions. And also thank you very much to all the speakers and the panelists that joined in as well.